Welcome back to the WinShape Marriage Podcast. It is almost Christmas time, which is so hard to believe.
I know, super exciting. And it makes me think about, Marlee, that one of the pieces of feedback we hear most from couples is that there's a lot of tension around holiday planning, especially when it comes to in-law relationships.
Yeah, I think we hear this very often. How do you go about navigating these conversations on calendaring for the Christmas season, for the holiday season? So we're going to be talking about just that today. And we figured this is not an episode that would be great to get one person's perspective on or one couple's perspective on, because every family is different and every family has a different dynamic at play. And so in today's episode of the WinShape Marriage Podcast, Rob and I are going to be interviewing a slew of different couples just to hear their individual perspectives on how they handle the calendaring and the scheduling for the holiday season in their families.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. I'm excited to jump in.
Yeah, let's get started. We're going to kick off our conversation on Christmas calendaring and planning with Genee and Rashad Francis. Genee, Rashad, thank you guys so much for being here on the WinShape Marriage Podcast. We're so excited to have y'all.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, so Genee, I know we had you on earlier this season. You are one of our WinShape Marriage team members, and we're excited to have you back today. And this time you brought your husband with you.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about you guys, just maybe how long you've been married and just anything fun, interesting about you guys.
Okay. Well, Genee and Rashad, and we've been married for 16 years. And we have two little boys, Gunnar and Reese, and they are 9 and 11.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
We have a lot of fun
Yeah.
with the family.
I'm sure you do, two boys. It keeps you on your toes.
That's right.
So this episode is going to be talking about just holiday planning, Christmas planning. It's coming out a few weeks before Christmas itself. And so I know a lot of couples, no matter if they've been married 5 months, 5 years, even 15 or 50 years, it's like holidays roll around every single year. And it seems that there's always some planning to be done with in-laws and extended family and different things like that. So we're going to ask you guys just a few questions and kind of get your perspective on 16 years of marriage, 2 kids, and tell us, just to kind of set the stage for the conversation, are your families local? Are they in other states? Kind of give us the lowdown of your family dynamics as far as your extended families.
Sure. So we have family everywhere. I've got family here in Georgia, but for the holidays, our family typically gathers in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And
My side typically gathers in Houston.
Houston. Okay.
And then I think we talk about the 2 different kind of chapters in our marriage.
Yeah.
So we used to live in Dallas, and that was kind of the midpoint between the families.
Okay.
And so that was one set of travel arrangements.
Yep.
And then when we moved to Atlanta, it's a totally different set of travel arrangements.
Right.
We have to get on a plane and then fly back and forth versus driving back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like for y'all's family, for the Francis family, for holidays in general, you guys most often are not in Georgia, not here, not in your home base, but you're with your families elsewhere.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So take us back to whether this conversation happened at the beginning of your marriage. It might have changed over time. But when it came to just planning around that first, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and just that holiday season in general, how did you guys, if you can think back, navigate those conversations just around that scheduling?
Sure.
Planning?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think even before we got married, we talked about a lot of what ifs. And during our engagement, it actually came up, I think, in our premarital regarding, hey, both of you like to spend time with your families. What are you going to do for the holidays?
Yeah.
And so we sat down, and I know that Genee had high value on spending holidays with her family, but we didn't want to leave my family out. So we just kind of said, okay, let's do Thanksgiving with my side of the family, and then Christmas with Genee's side of the family, and see how it goes from there.
Yeah.
And it's gone pretty well. Yeah.
Okay. Has it been pretty consistent then over those 16 years? Have you guys changed at all throughout, or had to make some adjustments or be flexible for any reasons throughout?
Yeah. At the top of my mind, I can come up with maybe 2 examples where we have had to become flexible and we've had to pivot. In one instance, there was a medical emergency on someone else's part. And so we did not go to Houston. And then there was another year where I had surgery.
Okay.
And so we didn't go to Houston. But in both of those instances, the really sweet thing about when I was having my medical surgery is our families decided, instead of us spending the holiday alone in Texas, they would come to us. And so both sides of the family joined us at our home. And it was really, really, really special.
Sweet.
So that gave us an opportunity to host a holiday, which we've never done.
Okay.
Because we're always traveling.
Yeah.
So we have had a couple of moments where we've had to pivot, and it's been really sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. How have you guys navigated, since it has been pretty consistent, have your families been fairly accepting of just, hey, this is the rhythm that they've established? Or if you can think back to kind of how did you guys communicate those rhythms with your families and say, hey, this is what our new family has decided?
Sure. It was probably harder with my family than Rashad's family, because our family is super tight-knit and we have literally spent every Thanksgiving and Christmas my entire life together. And so 16 years ago, we get married and all of a sudden I'm not coming to Thanksgiving.
Right.
So it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And if I'm being honest, I'm probably still reminded that we don't come to Thanksgiving.
Okay.
But it has gotten easier through the years for everyone to settle in. It was emotional for me, even the first few years. But I think Rashad and I making a decision together, getting in alignment and really getting very clear and comfortable with our choice, it just made it easy to be able to communicate like, this is what we've decided. And although dealing with it, managing it in the moment was difficult, I think he and I have never been sideways on it. So
Yeah. I'll say sometimes it's a little bit stressful. I'd say that over time, as our family grew, the larger family grew, and it came to like a lodging. Like when it was just me and Genee, we could go stay with her grandmother, or I can go stay with my mom or my brother.
Right.
As our family got larger, and then other people had kids, and our kids have cousins, we had to go, oh no, like we run out of bedrooms. Like what do we do?
Right.
And then there's this whole dynamic of the family, since we are not local, they want to see and spend time with the kids. So if we don't stay with them, they're like, oh, well, you're taking away time with the kids. This is our time. So some of the conversations we had to navigate through.
Had to navigate throughout. Yeah. I love what you said, though, even in the beginning of, hey, like, just because this was the decision we made, it wasn't necessarily easy.
Sure.
Like, it still was a new adjustment.
Absolutely.
And something Julie Baumgartner has said, I think on this podcast before, was, you've done the same thing your whole life with your family.
That's right.
And then you just kind of have this rose-colored glasses of expectation of, well, that's how it's going to be, except for you marry a spouse who's done the same thing their whole life with their family. So having to figure out that dynamic, I love that you said, hey, just because this was the decision we made, it wasn't like it was just boom, boom, 1, 2, 3, done, piece of cake.
No.
And it did take some time.
It does.
But the important thing was you guys had decided together and you didn't allow it to get y'all sideways.
That's right.
Yeah,
Which I think is really beautiful. Well, this is just a short, quick conversation. We're trying to get a lot of different perspectives from different couples. I'd love to kind of wrap us with what's just one key takeaway you would want anyone listening, again, whether they're in that first year of marriage and this is their first time planning, or maybe they've been married 5-10 years, but they're juggling some medical emergencies or different things. What's a piece of advice that they could take away from y'all's experience?
Absolutely. I think the most important thing is just being in alignment with your spouse and being able to sit with your spouse. And even if you have to incorporate a third party, I think sometimes we don't know when to go to counseling, but this is a topic that is high topic. And so understanding, like, if we can't navigate the conversation well, then let's invite a third party in. But I think it's so important to get on the same page with your spouse and reach a point of alignment before you involve other people, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, because everyone has an opinion. But the most important thing is that you and your spouse have come together and you have made a decision that works for your family. So that would be my piece of advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say don't assume that what you've done historically is what your spouse wants to do. So we start talking about holidays pretty early.
Yeah.
And it's not, serious conversation, but it's kind of, what are you thinking? What's going on? How are you feeling? I know one of the things that we've changed over the years is because the travel kind of stressed us out a little bit, we started to make Christmas an extension of our vacation.
Okay.
So we said, hey, going back and forth stresses us out. We need kind of a breather.
Yeah.
So we decided to leave the kids for Christmas and then have like an annual New Year's trip.
We do.
So that's kind of more
We
over
do.
time, just through conversations based upon how we're feeling with holiday travel.
So you spend Christmas with your family, with your children.
Yes.
And then they get a little extra time
That's
with
right.
the grandparents and
Yes.
cousins and things. And you guys have your own getaway.
We do.
Start the new year
Yeah,
fresh.
We
do.
Okay, there's a tradition for
Yeah,
those
yeah,
listening.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
hey,
It's a great reset.
Yeah.
It's a great reset. And
I
the
love
kids
that.
have their own traditions with my parents
Yeah.
for New Year's. That's beautiful and precious. So everybody's happy.
wow.
Yes.
That's great.
But that came because when we started this, we got back from Christmas, it just felt like drain.
Yeah.
It's too much.
It was just like this is a lot of travel.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
what can we do to kind of recharge?
Sure.
I
So
love
we started
that.
doing
Do y'all
that.
do y'all go to the same place every year or
We
pick somewhere
don't.
now? Do you have somewhere in mind this year that you're going?
We actually just had the introduction, like, what are you thinking conversation
Okay.
last
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
We haven't landed anywhere, but we try
Okay.
to go somewhere different.
Nice.
And just, explore and just have time to just let our hair down and
Yeah.
just be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap. I'm so
Yeah.
excited that you guys were here with us today and could kind of take us through your family, the Francis family, and around their conversations around this dynamic. And so thank you guys so much for being here and walking us through the Francis family holiday traditions and planning. And it was a joy to have you guys with us. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
yeah. Up next, we're going to hear from Bob and Suzanne Agan, a WinShape Marriage host couple, on their family's perspective on this conversation. Well, Bob, Suzanne, thank you guys for being here as guests on the WinShape Marriage Podcast.
We're glad to be here.
So excited to have you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks
thank
for
you.
having us.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I know who y'all are, but you're one of our WinShape Marriage host couples. But tell us a little bit just about you guys, maybe how long you've been married, where you live at, just
Yeah, so I'll kick off. I'll let Suzanne finish up. We've been married for just over 26 years. We live here in Rome, and so
Yeah, we have one daughter. She just turned 25 yesterday. So happy birthday,
happy
Gabby.
birthday.
And yeah, we've been here for about 15 years. Before that, we were in Augusta and then Houston before that, California before that.
Okay.
So we've moved around quite a bit, but we just love being here in Rome.
Yeah, absolutely. And are y'all's families, like extended families, your parents or family, and your families local as well, or are they?
So we're in a unique way. Both
Okay.
of my parents have already passed on at this point.
Okay.
So for us, it's just Suzanne's parents are still living.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my parents are actually up in North Carolina.
Okay.
And then I have one brother who's in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
And then his kids are now kind of getting out. His son is now in the Air Force in South Carolina. So we're kind of spread out a little bit, a little
Yeah.
more than we used to be for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure some of those dynamics and even the dynamic of having your parents have passed at this point, but obviously that wasn't always the case. So,
Right.
might affect just some of these holiday questions that we're going to jump into here. So kind of want to kick us off and just ask, we're centering this episode around this idea of planning around the holidays, specifically Christmas, which is going to be here so soon.
That's hard to believe.
I know. So kind of just talking through, like, how do you navigate, like, what to do about Christmas? Your spouse has their family. I have my family. We have our own family. And y'all have been married 26 years. So you have it all figured out.
Well,
That's it. We'll go with that.
Okay.
yeah. We got it figured out, and then
Yeah.
things change. And
That's
then we got to
right.
figure it out all over
Different
again.
seasons.
Yeah. So when it gets around to this time of year and you guys, as the two of you, are having just these conversations around navigating, scheduling, and planning for Christmas, what does that look like as far as communicating between the two of you?
Yeah, so just between the two of us, we obviously the season of life that we're in right now, our priority is the two of us and our daughter. She's not married yet, so we start there. How does our schedules work? How's her schedule going to work? And that's kind of where we start, kind of that inner ring, that circle there.
Yeah, it's definitely, we have a big discussion about priorities.
Mm-hmm.
What's our priority? When we were all together when Gabrielle was young, that was easy. And so then our priority was spending time with the family that we were never around, that we didn't have as much money, we couldn't travel as much. So holidays became the time that we got to spend with my parents in North Carolina or with his parents in Rome. Now that Gabrielle doesn't live with us and she only gets 1 day, maybe 2 days off for a holiday, especially at Christmas, then we just figure that out first.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you guys have a grown adult daughter. So now, like you said, your priorities have shifted. But then also at one point, you guys were the grown adult son and daughter, and you were communicating with your parents and in-laws. So when you were kind of figuring out what the Agan family was doing, how did you then go and communicate that with your extended family and your in-laws?
Yeah, so we started early. For us, we've never, even when Gabrielle was young, and we decided at one point we wanted her to be in her bed Christmas morning. So when that transition happened, we started communicating early, and still to this day, we probably start the conversation around Christmas, around August, September. Yeah. Just, okay, this is what our schedule is going to look like. This is when we're going to go. If we're going to travel to North Carolina or if we're going to travel to the St. Louis area, we start having that conversation early. If we can, if we can't, if not, how can we make those schedules work to where we can overlap with each other? But we started conversations early.
Yeah, and we do know that one day we're going to be those parents that our daughter is going to have kids that are her priority.
Right.
And so we definitely want to be very respectful, of my parents and my brother with his kids being in different stages of life. For a long time, that conversation centered on whose home will it be at this year, because we all got together.
Yep. Okay.
And we alternated. My parents, our home, and then my brother's up in St. Louis, because it's a lot of travel. Yeah. And that worked successfully for that season of life. Yeah. That doesn't work anymore because we're obviously not going to leave Gabrielle. And my brother isn't going to leave his daughter or his son if he's able to get together with him. So my parents are very gracious and have started traveling more to come to either his house or our house. Or even now we've started, okay, well, we can't no longer just plan for Christmas. So let's look at maybe Thanksgiving instead of Christmas this year. Or let's get together another time when my daughter can take more time off. And so, like Bob said, we start early. Yeah. And I think we've all finally agreed we're not going to get our feelings hurt. We're all going to do the best that we can to get together when we can. And luckily, my family is very gracious and works very well together with that.
Yeah. Sounds like, and I know this won't be the case for everyone listening, but it sounds like in a situation for you guys, having your extended families also on board of like, hey, we're all trying to figure out this thing together. Like, it's not like one way is the way. Like we all have kids, we all have things. These are still our parents, but now we have kids, and maybe eventually they're going to have kids. And so there's one piece of encouragement. If you do have a family, extended family that is flexible to having these conversations, again, I know that won't be the case for everyone, but for those families that are, it's like, that's even a great starting point of, hey, let's just all kind of almost a round table here. And
exactly.
Pretty close.
Have this conversation. Yeah.
And I will just kind of put it out there. It was not always this easy.
Yeah.
There was a lot of times when people got their feelings hurt, when schedules didn't work out, when there were arguments and tears, and those things have happened. But I think that we've come to realize that we love each other too much to let it continue to be that way.
Yeah. What piece of advice would you give to maybe someone in that situation where they're feeling like, okay, that sounds so great, and maybe when we're in year 20 whatever of marriage, we'll kind of feel like we're on the easier side of this. But if they are rather navigating maybe those hurt feelings, what would you maybe say to to that?
Yeah, we would just say, just talk about it. Instead of our philosophy in life is just open, honest, genuine communication, because a lot of times hurt feelings or frustrations come from a lack of communication or miscommunication. So we just have that with just talk about it and like, hey, look, I know this. Some your feelings are hurt and stuff, but let's talk about why. This is how we're here, and we also try to include them in that decision-making process for us. So although we may have our core things, but okay, look, let's talk about how we can make Christmas work, because we're going to spend time together. Yeah. I mean, because that's part of what it's about. It's about spending time with family, but we also, look, how can we be flexible? And we also try to be flexible too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So if we're asking our family to be flexible, we need to be willing to be flexible too. Yeah. And so we know those early years weren't always that way. And it's, when we were in Houston, her brother was in California, her mom and dad were in North Carolina, we were even more spread out then. So
literally could not get further apart.
Yeah, no kidding. That's like you have every quadrant.
Pretty close. Yeah. So, and it was just like, look, go to somebody's house. Mm-hmm. If we can't get there by Christmas, we'll come a day or two after. Yeah. Especially because my parents were still living at that point. And so that's another factor that we don't have to factor in now, but I'm sure most people do. They've got both sets of parents living. So, so we're going to be together. It just, we may not be there right on Christmas Day and maybe a day or two after, but, just trying to be flexible because we really do want to see everyone and spend time, because it's what Christmas is about. Yeah. Just spending time with family is one of the key things what it's about.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it may seem like a given, but man, just love each other well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we take the time to just stop and think about these hurt feelings, these tears all come from a place of we love each other and want to be together. Mm-hmm. That's a good foundation, and just keep coming back to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you guys have kind of navigated this, and you're on the other end of it a little bit.
We've got this season. When the next season comes, we'll
navigate that.
Reestablish some new some new pathways forward. Yeah. So
you're living the empty nest life with
we
your
are.
adult daughters. I hope you guys, the three of you, and then extended family that you're able to see, have a Merry Christmas this year, and
thank you.
Happy holidays and all of the things.
Merry Christmas to you guys too.
Much.
Thank y'all so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Now we're going to talk to Greg Smalley about how he and his wife navigate holiday planning. Greg Smalley, thank you so much for joining us today on the WinShape Marriage Podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Now, Greg, for our listeners, I know you're a pretty well-known guy, but could you catch us up to speed on a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I've been married to my wife, Erin, for 32 years. We have 4 kids. So we have a 30-year-old daughter who's married. We have a 27-year-old daughter who's married. Then we have a 23-year-old son, and then a 17-year-old daughter. And so keeps us busy. My wife, Erin, and I kind of lead the marriage team here at Focus on the Family. So we've been doing that for about 15 years now. Just love being here in Colorado and serving marriages here at Focus on the Family.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it sounds like your household is a lot of fun around Christmas time in particular, I'm sure.
It does get busy, and we're learning how to be in-laws, because we have to, just like every other family now, have to figure out when is it our turn. Like even last year for Thanksgiving, we ended up being able to go to Malaysia. We have a Focus Malaysia office. And so it messed up our one daughter and her husband who was going to spend Thanksgiving with us. Yeah. And so we're still learning all about that. So
yeah, that's wonderful. Well, that tees up perfectly for our conversation today. Starting off, when it comes to planning for things like Thanksgiving or Christmas, what is the process for you and Erin just talking about plans and schedules and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've learned over the years that we've got to do that early. So we think it's a horrible idea just to kind of, whatever. Hey, we'll just, as it unfolds, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Because we always like to, first and foremost, as husband and wife, go, what do we hope Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays will look like? And so we talk that through, and then we also talk about expectations. We one time were going on a a family vacation over Thanksgiving, and we'd been disconnected and running at such a busy, fast pace. And I didn't realize how much I had built up for this family time. So we get there, first day, my older kids, I mean, they all start fighting. And I marched everybody back into the little cabin we're staying in, and I lectured them. I told them we were going to have fun. You're going to get along. We're not going to fight. And I stormed out. And everyone was like, what is up with Dad? And as my wife and I kind of processed that, I realized that I was putting so many hopes into this family time, thinking we've been disconnected. This will do it. We're going to build cool memories and all of that. And so I had to let that go. So I remember walking back into the cabin, just telling everybody, "Hey, I'm going to own that. Those are my expectations, and I'm so sorry for the way I acted." And now I wish I could, Rob, go. And we ended up having the best trip ever.
Yeah.
And it was fine. I mean, we did have some fun. There were more arguments. But what was different for me is that I was able to understand my unreasonable expectation and verbalize, just letting that go. And so that's helped Erin and I not only go, "Hey, what are we thinking?" But once we go, "Okay, we're hoping this is what happens now. What is our expectations?" And it just sets us up to let some of that stuff that's not realistic go.
Yeah. And I think it's important to go through and consistently do that resetting of expectations every year because, every year isn't going to look the same. And so life changes, circumstances changes, people have babies, things like that. And so you have to really just come to terms with, hey, this is what it'll look like this year.
Yeah.
Real tangibly, though, you talked about having a conversation with Erin beforehand about like, hey, this is what we're hoping for. This is what we want this to look like. What does timeline look like for you as far as leading into the holidays?
We kind of use October, after Halloween happens to really start to think that through. I mean, we'll be talking to kids throughout the year and remind us where are you thinking about going and what's going on for you guys, just to get a sense. And so, October-ish, we start making plans. And this year we used to live in Branson, Missouri. And we were like, man, that'd be fun just for Thanksgiving, just to go there and hang out and play. And so that launched into that line of thinking. And then the daughter and her husband is going to be with us. They're like, oh, we'd love to do that. So we definitely start to do that. If we're going, when we were a little bit younger, when we were thinking about now whose family are we going to be around, we were always very intentional to then talk about if it was Erin's family, like, Erin, what do you need from me? How can I be your wingman? Like what? Because we all know when we go into our family of origin, when we go back for a holiday vacation, we just slip back into those old patterns and old roles. And I mean, she would laugh and go, man, you've got 2 master's degrees and a doctorate and yet you act like a kid.
Yeah.
You're quiet and I get that. And so even for her, and so we will come up with a plan. And she'll say things like, hey, if my uncle so-and-so corners me, I need you to come up and stand by me because he doesn't treat me a certain way when you're there.
Yeah.
So even stuff like that, like Erin and I going, man, we're a team. I'm your wingman. If it's your family, you're a wingman. If it's my family, what does that look like? How can we really support each other? So we're intentional to even have that sort of conversation. And, with our kids now, are there certain topics that we need to avoid?
Yeah.
I mean, politics obviously can be such a hot button. And I think it's a part of our responsibility to protect those times. And when we get, the date nights as a couple, vacations, holiday with family, I think it's a part of our responsibility to do our part to protect those moments from conflict. So I may go, I'm not gonna talk about that topic. Or, what do I do when my Uncle Frank goes, oh, hey, it looks like you've been eating a lot this year. Like, how do we manage that stuff? What am I gonna do? Shut down and get mad? No, I can go talk to Erin and she'll comfort me.
Yeah. And I
Even
love,
if Uncle Frank is mean.
Yeah.
So.
And I love that too, because it kind of highlights the teamwork dynamic within your relationship of like, hey, I know this situation is going to happen. Here's how you can come in and assist me in that, which is really cool to be intentional about on the front end. But it sounds like you guys have quite a family tree at this point. When it comes to getting all the people together and kind of organizing, what does that look like communicating with kids and extended family, things like that?
Yeah. I think Erin and I have tried to be real intentional to not place a burden or pressure on our kids. We always just tell them, man, we'd love to hang out with you. But you don't have to feel like, oh, we went here, to this in-law. Now we we just say, if it works out, we'd love to have you, let us know. Yeah. And so we're always trying to tell them, man, we pick you over, even, having a particular holiday. And so just don't feel that pressure. We'd love to have you. You're always welcome. Let us know. And at the same time, like we also, like I was telling you, I mean, we also look for opportunities, and when God places a cool opportunity before us, like he did, we got to go to Malaysia last year for Thanksgiving, and we talked that through with our kids who were supposed to be with us. And it's still probably one of my most favorite Thanksgivings. Yeah. Because we took two of our kids with us, and of course they're not celebrating Thanksgiving over in Malaysia, but they took us to this restaurant that just served fried chicken. And so that was our big, Thanksgiving meal was all this fried chicken. It was probably one of the best meals I've ever had. So even, I say that to go, we also matter. So we try to bend in for our kids, but we also matter too. And so we want to think that through ahead of time. That's why Erin and I usually, long before we start talking to kids about what are your plans, we talk about what is our hope and what's our expectation. And we try to get more clear on that so we can already show up for those conversations with our adult kids with sort of that in mind.
Yeah. And so it sounds like planning pretty early on, saying like, hey, this is what we're going to do, communicating that with your kids, saying like, hey, these are our plans, but then also doing that in an open-handed way, saying, hey, you're welcome to join, but also no obligation, no pressure on your side if you can't make that work. But and then kind of working at it from that approach.
Yeah, and then leaning in to what I think it's so important for the individuals. So for me, for Erin, to really think about what are we hoping will happen, and do I need to verbalize that to maybe release some of that? Because again, I think we put so much pressure on these get-togethers to make up for the disconnect, to make up for the lack of time, to make up for challenging relationships. The hope is, maybe me and Uncle Frank will finally have a good interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just not realistic. And there's, God can do anything. I mean, we've seen miracles as we work with couples. That's great, and that may happen. But to go into it eyes wide open, clear on here's what I'm expecting, and I probably need to be loose with that, and that just helps us enjoy those times even more.
Yeah. Now, Greg, for those listening, what's one key takeaway or one piece of advice that you might share with, say, a younger couple or maybe you from 20 years ago?
Yeah, if I could go back and talk to the younger me, I would encourage me to really make sure, especially in those early years of our marriage, that my wife Erin knows thoroughly, fully, that everyone knows that she is my loyalty. She is my top priority. And that was tricky for me. I had to learn that, and we all have to learn that, and that, but I wish I could have learned that faster, to make sure that she knows, hey, as we go into my family, and be around my family, you're still my number one. And therefore, what would it look like? How would you know that I'm choosing you as number one? What would I be doing? And just have that sort of conversation Because, there were some things that I did early on that just left her wondering and confused. And so just being more intentional, going, Erin, you're my top priority, man. You're I love my family, but you're number one. And what would that look like? What would I be doing, not doing, that would be evidence that you are number one? Yeah. And just to guard that and to emphasize that and to reinforce that around. Sometimes we've got to make those comments and things to our family. Hey, before I answer the question you just asked, let me check with my wife. Even that sort of language in, hey, let's see, what do you want to do tonight? Well, hey, let me go check with my wife.
Yeah.
Even that simple thing can make such a big difference.
Man, I love that answer so much. This idea of, honestly, like a thought process of, what things can I do to model to my spouse that they're my priority in this holiday season? And going into it with that mindset, I think really would shape the way that you would spend time around family and friends during the holiday season. But Greg, thank you so much for your time today on the WinShape Marriage Podcast. We really appreciate your wisdom.
Well, thank you for the amazing ministry you guys are doing there at WinShape. We love being a part. We've been able to come every single year since it's been open. So we just seen God do amazing things and miracles, and we love being a part of what WinShape is doing. So thank you.
Yeah, we love it. Well, thank you for your time.
Now we're going to hear from another WinShape Marriage host couple, William and Jessica Deagle, on the same conversation. So how the Deagles navigate Christmas planning. William, Jessica, thank you guys so much for being here as guests on the WinShape Marriage Podcast. We're so happy to have you guys.
Thank you, Marlee, for having us.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, so you guys are a WinShape Marriage host couple, one of our host couples. So that is one reason that we have you guys here. But we also are here just to talk about some Christmas planning, as the Christmas season is definitely upon us, and Christmas will be here before we know it.
Yeah.
So want to kind of just talk to you guys a little bit about how you approach this season in your married life and how you maybe have in the past and what you guys have kind of learned. So tell us real quickly just a little bit about you guys, maybe how long you've been married, where you live, things like that.
Sure. Well, we're William and Jessica Deagle. We've been married for 23 years, almost 24 coming up in January.
Okay.
We currently work as host couples, intensive host couples at WinShape, and also for the marriage retreats for the pastors' R&Rs.
Awesome. And 23 years, you said. So you guys have planned around a couple of holidays.
Yeah, there's been a few. Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to planning for Christmas particularly, and thinking about your families, your extended families, how do you guys as the Deagles, as you as a married couple, try to navigate those conversations with one another first?
Yeah, sure. That's a very loaded question. First, just let me give you an idea. My family is from Virginia, and they still all live there. Yeah. All of Jessica's family is currently living in Georgia. That's how it's been ever since we've been married for those 23 years. So we've had to navigate quite a few holidays between a lot of miles
and
of traveling.
And the first 13 years were in Virginia near William's family. So now we live near my family. So we've done a flip-flop on navigating holidays. Okay. It's been kind of interesting.
Like you guys were living in Virginia?
Yeah, we lived in Virginia for the first 13 years of our marriage, or raising our kids, I guess.
Right. Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
We laughed about this question in the car as we were talking about possible answers. Yeah. And I said, well, the first question is, how did we navigate communication? And we both said, not very well.
Those early years.
I think we avoided it sometimes because it felt like it was going to be conflict. Yeah. And so it was almost just like, okay, just let's not rock the boat.
Yeah.
But then you realize that's not realistic. So we got to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those conversations came up a lot, and I would have to say, if I could, at my, myself now, speak back to myself, 23 years ago, something like that, I would say you definitely have to put your family first, like that's your spouse, your children, and then you have to take the fall for the rest of it coming from the extended family because, you're always together and you're not always with your extended family, and they can put a lot of pressure on you to be there on that holiday.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think talking with your parents, and we said we think it's best for the child of those parents to talk with them.
Definitely.
Instead of putting that on your spouse or saying, well, you need to communicate with my mom that we're not coming or whatnot. It's better to go and manage that with your own parents and just head it off and say, look, I know things are going to feel different now.
Yeah.
But as our family's changing, things need to change. And I've found with our parents, if you head that off and they feel communicated with themselves, it eliminates some of the stress and the strife. It still doesn't avoid hurting their feelings, but at least you've like preempted the fact that you may not be there or things may not be the same.
Right. Clarity is kindness in those type of situations. And so even if they're not fully excited or on board with the new plan, just having that clarity
They're aware.
Well, this is the plan that
Right,
shared with us. So that kind of segues perfect into this next question of you guys communicate amongst yourselves. You said you didn't always do that well, that it took some time, but then it was a matter of communicating that with your in-laws and your extended family. So tell me a little bit more about how those conversations went, maybe in the beginning, and then you said at some point you guys switched, right? You moved from where your family was to where your family is. So how do you guys continue to navigate communicating with them?
Yeah, I think they're more used to it now, our parents and both sides of the family, because we've always done this. You know, we've been in different states, so they're kind of used to it. I would definitely say in the beginning, you need a lot of communication in advance, like not like a week before the holiday and you say, oh, hey, we're not going to be there, something like that, but just give them a lot of advance notice. And I think the more you communicate with them, they understand. In the early years, it's harder because, you're just married, you've been their child, you've been in their house.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you have your own house and they're expecting you to continue to, you're not going to be here Christmas morning, not going to be here at 6 a.m. to open gifts. And you're like, no, I'm not. So, it takes a little bit of time to get used to that.
And one of the hardest stands we had to make was just what William said earlier. We had to sell this message to both of our parents that, hey, we love y'all and y'all are not unimportant, but this is our most important concern now, meaning our nuclear small family, because we're building those traditions for ourselves. And I think if you can affirm your parents by saying like, just how y'all created this for us, and now we have all these great traditions that are difficult to change, we're trying to start that now for our own kids so that they feel like what they did was successful and good and that you're thankful for it. And so you want to replicate that. I mean, that was true in our case. I know that really helped with my mom.
No, I love that
mine.
because it's something of like, hey, we cherished like the childhood we grew up in. We cherished the traditions and the rhythms that you guys had in place for us. And we desire to do the same thing. And I know we were talking actually before we even started rolling that you guys had a child pretty soon into marriage. So that automatically you're like not even thinking about Christmas from your perspective as the Deagles, but then you also have this baby on the way too. And so it's like there's another layer, added in there as well.
That was a big layer. In fact, we probably did many foolish things early on, just trying to please everybody. Yeah. And we were living on the mission field at the time. So when we would come home for holidays, it was a big deal and everybody wants a piece of you. And so we were really running ourselves ragged, trying to make everybody happy and just toting that little baby everywhere, which you can do for a while. And then when you have 2 or 3 of those, I really appreciate that William finally, at one point, maybe 6 or 7 years into our marriage, he was like, okay, I'm going to be the advocate for us. And we were living near his family at the time. And so it was hard for him to go to his mom and say, we're going to be the ones that kind of disrupt the family tradition of getting together on actual Christmas Day, because we want to be in our home on Christmas Day. And I got to give it to him for that. That's hard to do and take all the flack from your siblings and your parents. But
absolutely.
Yeah, and knowing that, you're only 200 yards from their house.
We lived really close.
You can't walk over.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge for sure. I love what you said, going back to just giving them even that heads up. I'm kind of, we were wanting to get this episode out for our listeners as soon as possible, but I recognize that even as this episode airs, it's kind of butting up to Christmas, so I'm already thinking like, okay, maybe we'll replay it next year too for them as just like an awareness piece, because that also makes sense. I mean, just think about when you're planning things, if you give people longer notice, they have more time to process, they have more time to accept it, hopefully, or come to an acceptance.
And to that point, I was going to say, I'm so thankful for texting and technology today. I love to text people first because it does give an extra heads up. And some people process slowly and internally. And so if you send a text first saying, hey, these are our plans, these are the dates, we're available, and I'm going to follow this up with a call, but I just wanted you to know, I think that helps our families because our moms may forget what we said, and so then they have it in writing.
Right.
But it also, the initial emotion isn't on the phone with us.
Yes.
It's through a text.
Yes.
And so it's like it helps soften it
a little bit. Yeah.
And so then usually when I call her, any emotion that she might have initially felt, she's already worked through. So that could be a tip.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you guys have given us tons of great advice, even in answering these 2 questions that we talked about. I kind of want to wrap just this quick segment with you guys with, is there one piece of advice other than what you've already shared? If not, that's okay, that you would give to couples, no matter if they've been married, if they're in your season of marriage, 20 plus years, or maybe they're still in that newly married phase of 2 to 5 or 2 to 7 years. So any just advice, one last piece of advice you want to leave them with?
Wow. That's weighty. I would say for me, the main thing would be your immediate family, your spouse and your children, especially your spouse, is really the most important person.
Yeah, that's
and so
true.
You're going to have to think around that, concept. What are you going to do to keep the 2 of you happy?
Yeah.
And then it will flow down to the kids. So that definitely would be my biggest advice.
That's nothing new, but I think that would be our most important thing to emphasize is this relationship, it's the one not going anywhere. And when you chose that person, that's what we were called to do, is leave and cleave. And the reality of that is it's hard doing the leaving. But if you can stand firm there and not be afraid to be very honest emotionally with that person, like even saying, I am afraid to go take this to my mom. I need us to pray about it, or I need you to just encourage me because I don't want to hurt them. And to understand that they're feeling the same with their family. You don't want to hurt anybody, but when it comes down to it, the main thing you're trying to preserve is peace here and then making a beautiful space for your kids.
Absolutely. Well, that was beautiful. Thank you guys for sharing. Thank you guys for giving us a little just sneak peek into kind of the Deagle's approach to this. I know everyone has a little bit of a different approach, but I appreciate what you guys shared with us this morning and hope you guys do have a Merry Christmas with your family.
You too,
Thank
Marlee.
you, Marlee.
Thank
you too.
you.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
And now we're going to close our list of guest conversations today with Shaunti Feldhahn. Shaunti Feldhahn, thank you so much for joining us on the WinShape Marriage Podcast.
I'm delighted to be with you.
Now, Shaunti, for our listeners, could you give us a real quick overview and who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I am a social researcher, an author, a speaker. Basically, what I feel called to do is to dig out the little things that make a big difference, to help people really thrive in their lives and marriages.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay. And then fill us in on when it comes to the holidays. How long have you been married for? What does your family picture look like?
So I still can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but Jeff and I have just celebrated 30 years.
Wow. Okay.
Which is crazy.
That's
but
awesome.
It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. The way our holidays usually work is we have a fairly small family. We have our 2 adult kids. Of all of our family, just of the parents, just my mom is left. And Jeff's family lives in Michigan. And so we always have to choose. And so we always do Thanksgiving with Jeff's family and Christmas with our family.
Gotcha.
So that's our tradition.
And so you said Jeff's family is up in Michigan. Where is your mom located?
We actually moved her and my dad before he passed away down to Atlanta, which is where we live.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So as far as, and maybe this is think back to when you first got married. How did you navigate like figuring out the process of, hey, for Thanksgiving, we'll go to Jeff's family and for Christmas, we'll spend it with my family? Like, what was that?
Hey,
like?
Listen, every newlywed knows the feeling of that,
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, what about time with my family?
Uh-huh.
Or sometimes, unfortunately, people are like, no, we'll go to your family, right? Like, unfortunately, we actually navigated that relatively early as can we make this a tradition where one family is one holiday and one family is the other holiday? And thank goodness it worked, because we've basically done that almost ever since.
Yeah.
And actually having the expectations set a year in advance really solves it.
Yeah. And so as far as that initial conversation, if you could think back, like when you were trying to decide, like, hey, we'll do Thanksgiving, what was the conversation like with you guys? Did it go over smoothly? Was it like, okay, yeah, this is perfect, let's do that?
The hard part was, and this is something we've actually later, when we started doing the research with relationships, because Jeff and I do a lot of this research together.
Yeah.
We didn't realize it at the time, but the key kind of pivot point was when we decided to really believe the best of each other's intentions. Like, you are not trying to take me away from my family at the holidays, or you're not trying to be selfish, but, the concern, like Jeff's parents were older. He was the youngest of 4 boys, and he was born much, much later. And his dad was actually a World War II veteran.
Wow.
Like significantly older.
Yeah.
And so I had to recognize, actually, wait, like his sense of intensity about this is because it's not because he wants to keep me from my family.
Yeah.
It's because he's worried that this may be the last Christmas with his parents.
Mm.
And so that allows you to have a lot more grace.
Yeah, just understanding where he came from as far as like, hey, like I'm really concerned about this. Is that something that you guys talk through, or a place of understanding that you kind of came to after some years?
Are you sure you want to ask me that, Rob? I'm a marriage author. Do I really have to confess that we had a lot of tension around this in the early years?
Yeah.
No, it took a minute. It honestly, and I want to encourage all the newlyweds, all the people in your first 5 years of marriage. You'll get through this phase where everything leads to the "but what about" kind of feelings.
Yeah.
You will get through this. You'll figure out the right pattern.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I think one of the consistent themes I'm hearing in these conversations is nobody is like an expert at this when you first get married. Like everyone has to figure this out, and it's different for everyone. And so I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation. But as you think through like how things have changed over the years, and sometimes maybe Thanksgiving will look a little bit different. Maybe a family member's out of town or something like that. But when you think about communicating with family members specifically through the different changes and things like that, what does that process look like?
Well, everybody listening to this knows that sort of feeling of kind of tiptoeing into those conversations.
Yeah.
Like, well, we may not be able to do that this year. The thing that Jeff and I think a lot of people listening to this have discovered is that you have to have two things. You have to have some sense of boundaries. Like, we have to be able to do it this way for this reason. Like, this is important to us because, and kind of we need to hold to that. But at the same time, we have to have that with kindness. Like, we have to have grace and kindness and understanding of how it's being received on the other end, whether we agree with how it's being received or not.
Yeah. And so it's a balance of kind of protecting your own marriage and your own relationship, saying like, hey, we really need to do this to keep us sane, but we also want to communicate those things with kindness so that people don't get their feelings hurt.
Exactly. And listen, everybody knows everybody's families are different. Different people have different sensitivities. Somebody might be oversensitive about this and somebody's oversensitive about something completely different. Mm-hmm. But you can't make all of your decisions based on what eggshells you're going to break, right? When you're sort of walking through this, it really is important, especially if you are in those first few years, to be able to say, we're carving it out this way right now. Like, maybe in a number of years, it might be different, but it's really important for us. And hey, we'll come see you 4 days later or whatever it is to acknowledge and honor the relationship.
Yeah. And I love that quote. Don't make decisions based off of the eggshells you're going to break. That'll be tucked away for sure. So Shaunti, when you think back to 30 years ago when you were first getting started, what's one piece of wisdom or advice that you wish you knew that you know now?
Oh, for sure. It's this: have grace. Have grace with one another. That's, obviously the most important piece of this. Believe the best of one another and each other's intentions towards you. I mean, this is an incredibly important piece of kind of marriage skill anyway. Because it's really easy when your feelings are hurt to really believe like this person doesn't care, right? Like, they just don't understand how important my family is to me or whatever. Yeah. And they're choosing to be selfish. And that's a sinful little down deep there feeling that all of us have the tendency to have.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I wish that I would have, I wish that somebody would have slapped me upside the head and been like, get your perspective. Like, your husband cares about you. He loves you. It's just, that doesn't mean that something else isn't also important to him. It doesn't say anything about his love for you or his selfishness or lack thereof. So.
Yeah. He's trying his best for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Shaunti, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. And I hope you and Jeff have a Merry Christmas.
Thanks.
So Marlee, we just heard from a wide range of couples and so many different seasons and perspectives. And I think one thing that I picked up throughout each conversation is this idea of it really took them a couple of years to figure out a solution that worked. Yeah. And then once they found something that worked, they just stuck with that and consistently followed through on that plan. But I also know that it's a little bit of a different perspective when you're in the early years of marriage. When you're at year 35 and you've had a couple of years under your belt, it's a little bit different than when you're on year 6. I think I'm on year 2 now. Yeah. And so I'd be curious to hear how you and Cody navigate this conversation around holiday planning with your families.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to point out because we did get to hear from a variety of couples, and I think it was really fruitful, especially to hear the wisdom and what they had to share from being married for so long and how they've navigated this throughout their marriage. Yeah. But you're right. I'm still 6 years in, you're 2 years in. And so it's kind of like, okay, what do we do? Like, we really are in the beginning of laying that groundwork and laying that foundation. For Cody and I, like I said, 6 years in, we've kind of done a couple of things. We've kind of tried to figure it out along the way, but we have settled into a pretty good rhythm over the last couple of years when it comes to just communicating with each other. I think something that we've taken that a lot of these other couples have shared is that we start by communicating with each other first. And so, like, what do you want out of this holiday season? What do I want out of this holiday season? What's important to us? And we have those conversations. a lot of times that they've been looking the same over the last couple of years because we have started to kind of settle into finding the things that work. And then we go and communicate that with our families. And so I know that something for us that we have done, we go to Christmas Eve service on Christmas Eve. For us, that is a non-negotiable. So if part of a family is having a gathering or a dinner or something on Christmas Eve, we've decided that for us, our priority is the Christmas Eve service first. Mm-hmm. And if something else can fit around that, great, but we're definitely doing Christmas Eve service. And then we have actually reserved Christmas Day for the two of us. And so we do not have kids yet. We are actually expecting a little one.
How exciting, yeah.
Our last Christmas as just the two of us. But we have really worked hard to make Christmas Day our like sacred day for the two of us in preparation for the season that we were expecting to come at some point. And so the last couple of Christmas days, again, it's just the two of us and we spend it together. And so for us, we sleep in. We've created our own tradition. We make a breakfast casserole. It's more of like a lunch casserole because we eat it at like noon. We open stockings from one another, a few presents from each other, and then we just watch Christmas movies. And this has been something we've loved and enjoyed, and we don't feel like we're running a bunch of different directions on the day of Christmas. And we're looking forward to next Christmas when we have a little one with us, already being in that rhythm.
Yeah.
So,
well, one of the things I heard you say at the very beginning is this idea of you talk about what is important to you and what's important to Cody. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about like, what does that actual conversation look like as far as like, hey, I really enjoy on Christmas Day doing this, or what does that look like?
Yeah, for us, like we grew up in families where we had pretty set traditions in our families around Christmas. And so I remember early on, we talked about, hey, like what traditions did you guys do? What did my family do? And what kind of tradition do we want to bring into our own family? And so again, back to what I was saying about the Christmas Eve service, like that's something that my family did every year. And so for me, that really did feel like a non-negotiable. And so we just had that conversation of, hey, this is really of like high value to me. Yeah. And then for him, his family, he had grandparents in different places and parents in different places, and his parents aren't together. And so in the beginning stages, there was a lot of kind of moving around, and he quickly realized, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to spend my whole day driving here, there, and everywhere across the state of Georgia. They were all in the state of Georgia, but it was a lot of commuting around.
Yeah.
And
that's draining, for sure.
For sure. And so he expressed to me, like, hey, it's important to me that we have some time that's just us. And so that means for all the family, my family included, his family included. And so we made that decision together and we stuck with it. And it was how the Arnold family, like what we decided. Yeah. Now, that's not to say that we don't still see our families and enjoy our families.
Yeah,
We've just communicated that. I think you and I were talking off air even before this of like, you can still have Christmas, you can still have Thanksgiving, New Year's, all the things, even if it's not on the literal day of 12/25.
Just being flexible for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the thing I love so much about that too is when you boil down, hey, what's important for you for Christmas? What's important for me for Christmas? Mm-hmm. You start to uncover, and it sounds like Cody did this too, is like some of these things aren't important to me.
Yeah.
And so those are areas that you can say, hey, actually, this is more of a strain for our relationship. Maybe we just need to cut back on those things and really prioritize the things that really make us feel loved and cared for around the holiday season. So that's really cool. The other thing I really enjoyed about what you were saying, Marlee, is the idea of setting traditions and rhythms now for your family that you're still building, you know? And so this idea of being home at Christmas, every Christmas Day, or Christmas Eve, always going to the Christmas Eve service, even though you said you're just now expecting, like, you're building rhythms and routines that your family will step into that will last for far beyond just the 2 or 3 years that, or I guess you guys have been married 6 years now, but just that time frame, right?
Totally.
And so it's this idea of like, yes, you have your family's origin, but this new family that you're building, there are new traditions that can come from that, which is something that was so encouraging from what you shared.
Yeah, thanks. Now, enough about how me and Cody handle it.
Yeah.
I am curious, you and Madeline, you've got 2 years under your belt.
Yeah.
But you're still like, I still consider us to be in that newly married season of life.
Yeah.
And again, we're just now stepping into a new season. So what about you and Madeline? Like, how do y'all approach this kind of conversation and this calendaring every year?
Yeah, for sure. And Madeline and I are in a bit of a unique situation because her family and my family live very close together. I think like 20 minutes apart. And so as far as, the first couple of years of marriage, we've done like Thanksgiving. We've just done both families in one day. And we get to the end of the day and we're like so full. We're like tired of eating at that point. Don't eat for the rest of the week. Yeah. But, it's something that we're still figuring out as far as like, does that make sense? Does that work for us? But it's just something that's given us the opportunity to be flexible when it comes to holiday schedules and things like that. But the other thing that's a little bit unique about my family and Madeline's family, and it's one thing I'm proud of / interested in, is like Madeline's family is a family of like super A-type planners. Like they have everything planned like months in advance.
Okay.
And my family, like, this will sound like a joke, but it's not. Like 2 weeks before, we'll be like, hey, what should we do for Christmas this year?
Yeah.
And it's just like the nature of like how we are and like our different upbringings and cultures. And so for us, it actually works well because a lot of Madeline's family will set up like, hey, this is what we're doing here. This is what we're doing for this holiday. This is when we're meeting with grandparents. And then for my family, it's like, we're pretty flexible people. Like we can go in and say like, oh yeah, we can meet for Christmas on Friday. We can meet for Christmas on Saturday, whatever it may be. And so it's given us a lot of flexibility to go into the Christmas season open-handed to say, hey, what can we do to make this work for everyone? My family is kind of small, so it's my brother, his wife, Madeline and I, and then my parents. And so when we get to Christmas, it's really important for us to all be together. If one of us isn't there, it really feels like, hey, this is a really different holiday season. And so for us, it's really important to be flexible and prioritize, like, how can we find that time together, even if it's not actually on the holidays themselves, which is great. And then, sorry, I'm talking a lot, but
no, you're good.
Last thing I'll add is, you touched on this idea of being at home every Christmas. That's just your time for you and Cody and your future children and whatnot. And, that's something that we've been doing as well, is like, how can we keep the Christmas day itself special for just our family so that as we step into having children down the road, what does that look like for us to actually like have a Christmas morning together as a family, And so I would say that's a important thing that we're learning, is like the importance of carving out space and time for just the two of us to enjoy Christmas together.
And your family, like the two of you are a family. I think that's what is important to remember too. It's like, hey, when you guys came together as husband and wife, it might just be two of you for now, but you're still your own unique family. Yeah. And so it is important to find ways of how can just the two of us also enjoy this holiday season.
Yeah.
And then going backwards to something you said that I really loved was kind of like leveraging the strengths of each of your family.
For sure.
So each of your families, rather. So knowing that Madeline's family is planning ahead of time and they're doing all these things, then that's great. We can leverage that strength. We can say, okay, we're ready to jump on board. We'll plan well with Madeline's family. And then fortunately for you, with your family being flexible, you can also then leverage that strength and say, hey, okay, well, this is great. Like my wife's family, we've got this all figured out. Now my family, we're flexible and we can figure that out. And I think that is a cool thing to just talk about too, of like, hey, how do each of your own individual families, like what strengths do they bring to the table to this conversation? Because ultimately the conversation starts with the two of you. But as we've asked each of the guests that we've had on, like, hey, you then have to extend that conversation out to the in-laws and to the extended family.
Yeah.
And just remembering or leveraging like what strength does that family bring to the table and how can we tap into that around this conversation?
Yeah, for sure. When you just kind of brought this thought up, but when it comes to actually like communicating your plans, I know you have this rhythm that you've kind of set in stone now, but what does it look like for you guys to communicate plans back with family members?
Yeah, we start early enough. We start, we don't leave it to a couple days out or a couple weeks out, but maybe a month or so or 2 months before we start talking like, hey, as a reminder, like or doing Christmas Eve service. A lot of times my mom and her husband do like to join us at our church for Christmas Eve service. So that's been fun. And since we're not seeing them right now on Christmas Day, that's kind of been our thing where we see them on Christmas Eve. And then they go and do their own thing on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And then I kind of alluded to this, but Cody's family is a bit larger and there's some more moving parts. And so we just kind of, it's kind of become a rhythm established of, hey, we pretty much know that like Christmas Eve, Christmas Day are kind of out. Like everyone has their own, unique families of creation. Anyways, the families of the two of them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And, but yet we still want to see each other as well. And so we just kind of talk through like ahead of time, what does the weekend before look like or the weekend after like, and people's work schedules and things. A lot of times it's just texting, like
for sure,
figuring out what can work. So
yeah, I would say on the texting point, and one thing that works well for us because like different people in our family are different levels of skilled at like rapid communication. I'm probably in the camp of like, will probably be a day or two before I respond to the text message.
Yeah.
But one thing that's helpful for us is just to have a group message with everyone and just say like, and granted, we're at a small enough scale as far as like our family to where you can fit everyone in an iPhone group message. But so for us, it's just helpful to get everyone on the same page and say like, here are the plans. I'll bring this for dessert, whatever it is.
Right.
Put that all in one text thread so everyone's in the loop versus like one person reaching out to their child or something like that and making plans. And then the other spouse kind of feels out of the loop. So I think that's been one thing that's a helpful learning for us as far as like making sure we communicate well.
I think that's great. I've enjoyed even just you and I talking because it's like, hey, there is still something that, again, we are truly in the beginning stages of figuring this out.
Yeah.
But I think there's still something to offer in that season as well. And I'm sure several people listening, we've got those faithful listeners who have been married 15, 20, 30 years. And they're like, yes, I remember back to those early years of marriage and those hard conversations around the holidays. But I know we have people listening too that fall into our season of marriage too. And they're like, this is awesome. But what do y'all do? Because you've only had 2 Christmas seasons so far. So,
and I do want to add one thing too before we get to the ending here. But if you are a person that's listening and you've been married for a while, and maybe you have a child that's in that like newlywed season,
good call.
The one thing I would say, just from a newlywed person, is just like have grace, because like they are figuring out what this looks like. They're navigating all these new relationships that you didn't go to school for. Like nobody taught you how to handle this.
Yeah.
And so even though you might be in the first couple of years and you're like, man, this is really frustrating that their Christmas plans don't look like my Christmas plans, just give them grace and understanding and say like, okay, they'll figure it out. They'll find a rhythm that works, but I just got to give them the space and time to be able to get to that point. So
speaking for all the newly married people, I think that was a great charge for the parents and in-laws as well. So I've enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Rob, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think it was a great just value even for me, just talking with you a little bit more and hearing how you and Madeline approached this as well. So I enjoyed your perspective and just enjoyed talking with you about the holiday season.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And for those listening, we hope that this episode has been helpful for you as you navigate talking through Christmas plans with your spouse. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode.
Yeah, and Merry Christmas from all of us here at WinShape Marriage, and also a Happy New Year. Just a quick housekeeping note for you guys. We will be taking a few weeks off for the holiday season for our team to spend some time with our families. So we are not done with season 2 yet, but we will pick back up with the second half of season 2 at the beginning of the new year. So Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Hey there. If you're enjoying this conversation, make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more marriage resources. And let us know what you think of this episode in the comments below.